The clock on the wall showed 11:47 p.m. when she pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Riverside Hotel. Her shift had just ended, but instead of heading straight to the parking lot like she usually did, something made her pause in the lobby tonight. The sound was pulling her in. Piano music floating through the air from the lounge area, not the usual recorded background music that played during the day, but real fingers on real keys. She could tell the difference. She had always been able to tell. She walked slowly toward the sound, her worn sneakers silent on the marble floor. The hotel lounge was busier than usual for a weeknight. People sat at small tables, drinks in hand, watching someone play at the grand piano in the corner. The instrument was beautiful, all glossy black with gold accents catching the warm light from the chandeliers above. But the music coming from it was not beautiful. The person playing was stumbling through a simple jazz piece, hitting wrong notes every few measures. She winced slightly, her fingers twitching at her sides. She knew exactly where the mistakes were, could hear in her mind how the piece was supposed to sound. "That's the fifth one tonight," a voice said beside her. She turned to see Patricia, one of the other night staff members, holding a tray of empty glasses. Patricia had worked at the hotel for almost 20 years and knew everything about everyone. "Thomas is holding auditions for the weekend pianist spot. It opened up last week." She nodded, watching as the current player finished with a flourish that was more dramatic than the performance deserved. A few people in the audience clapped politely. Thomas, the lounge manager, stood near the bar with his arms crossed. Even from across the room, she could see his expression. He was not impressed. "Thank you," Thomas called out, his voice smooth but dismissive. "We'll let you know." The pianist gathered their sheet music quickly, clearly understanding that "we'll let you know" meant "don't wait by the phone." As they left, Thomas checked his watch and sighed loudly. "Anyone else?" he asked, looking around the room. His eyes swept over the remaining people waiting, then landed on her, standing near the entrance to the lounge. "You here for the audition?" She shook her head quickly. "No, I was just leaving. I work at the front desk." "I know who you are," Thomas said, walking closer. He was tall, always wore expensive suits, and had the kind of confidence that sometimes crossed into arrogance. "You're always hanging around when there's music playing." "I've noticed." She felt her face grow warm. She didn't realize anyone had noticed her pausing to listen during her breaks, or the way she sometimes stood near the lounge entrance when the piano was being played. "I just like music," she said quietly. Thomas laughed, and it wasn't a kind sound. Sure, everyone likes music, but liking it and playing it are two very different things. You know how many people think they can play just because they took a few lessons as kids? She didn't answer. Patricia shot her a sympathetic look and moved away with her tray of glasses. "I bet you're one of those people," Thomas continued, warming to his subject now. A few of his friends at the bar were listening, starting to smile. "Probably took piano lessons for a year or two, can maybe play chopsticks or Happy Birthday, and thinks that means you're a musician." "I didn't say I played," she replied, keeping her voice even. But something in her tone must have given her away because Thomas's eyes lit up. "Oh, but you do, don't you? You play a little." He was grinning now, sensing an opportunity for entertainment. It was late. The auditions had been disappointing, and he had an audience. "Come on, admit it. You play piano." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Yes. Thomas clapped his hands together. "I knew it. Everyone thinks they can play. You know what? I'll make you a deal. A bet, actually." "I don't want to bet," she said, already knowing where this was going and wanting no part of it. "Hear me out," Thomas said, moving to block her path to the exit. "It's simple. You sit down at that piano and play one classical piece, just one. Play it properly all the way through, and I'll give you a spot in the audition process. Real consideration for the weekend position." She glanced at the piano, then back at Thomas. "And if I can't? Then you work my closing shifts for the next month. You know, the ones that run until 3 in the morning on weekends, the ones nobody wants." His smile widened. "Fair deal, right? If you're as good as you think you are, you've got nothing to lose." "I never said I was good," she protested. "I just said I played." "Then don't take the bet," Thomas shrugged. "But you'll always wonder, won't you? Wonder if you were good enough. Wonder if you could have done it." Patricia had returned and was shaking her head slightly, warning her not to do it. 2 other staff members had appeared, drawn by the commotion. Word traveled fast in the hotel. Everyone knew Thomas liked to make examples of people, liked to prove he was the smartest person in the room. She looked at the piano again. The beautiful instrument sat there waiting. When was the last time she had played on something that nice? When was the last time she had played for anyone but herself? One piece, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Classical. One piece, Thomas agreed, his grin triumphant. He thought he had already won. Classical music played properly all the way through. No stopping, no starting over. She walked toward the piano slowly, aware that everyone in the lounge was now watching. The conversations at the tables had died down. Even the bartender had stopped mixing drinks to see what was happening. Thomas followed her to the piano, making a show of gesturing toward the bench like a game show host, presenting a prize. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the room, we have one more audition tonight. Let's see what our front desk clerk can do. She sat down at the bench, adjusting its height slightly. The piano was even more beautiful up close. She could see her reflection in the glossy black surface. She looked tired. 7 years of night shifts would do that to a person. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the keys. The ivory was cool and smooth under her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her breathing. Behind her, she could hear Thomas saying something to his friends at the bar, probably already planning the joke he would tell about this later. She thought about her mother, asleep at home in the small apartment they shared. She thought about the piano in their living room, the only piece of furniture that really mattered. She thought about all the hours spent practicing while most people her age were out living their lives. Then she took a breath, lifted her hands, and brought them down on the keys. The first note of Chopin's Nocturne rang out into the silent lounge, clear and perfect and heartbreakingly beautiful, and everything changed. The second note followed the first, then the third, and suddenly the room wasn't a hotel lounge anymore. It was somewhere else entirely, somewhere beautiful and sad and full of longing. Her fingers moved across the keys like they were having a conversation with the piano, not the hesitant, clumsy conversation of someone who had taken a few lessons years ago. This was the language of someone who had spoken it fluently for most of their life. Thomas's smile had frozen on his face. He stood perfectly still near the bar, his drink halfway to his lips, forgotten. The cocky expression that had been there just moments before was melting away, replaced by something that looked a lot like confusion. She didn't notice. Her eyes were closed now, her head tilted slightly to one side as her hands danced across the keyboard. The Chopin piece was not an easy one. It required technical skill, sure, but more than that, it required feeling. It required understanding what the composer was trying to say when he wrote those notes almost 200 years ago. And she understood it perfectly. The music swelled and dipped, moving through the emotional landscape of the piece like a river finding its path. Her left hand provided the steady, rolling bass line while her right hand sang out the melody, sometimes soft and delicate, other times stronger and more insistent. The two hands worked together in perfect harmony, the way they had done thousands of times before. People in the lobby outside the lounge had stopped walking. A couple who had been heading toward the elevators turned around and came back. A businessman who had been checking his phone at a nearby chair looked up, drawn by the sound. Within a minute, a small crowd had gathered near the entrance to the lounge. Patricia stood near the back, her hand covering her mouth. She had worked with this woman for 3 years. 3 years of night shifts, of small talk about the weather and complaints about difficult guests. 3 years, and she had never known. How had she never known? The piece moved into its most difficult section, where the tempo quickened and the notes came faster. Her fingers flew over the keys now, never missing, never hesitating. It was the kind of playing that took years to master. Decades even. The kind of playing that required more than just practice. It required passion. One of Thomas's friends leaned over and whispered something to him, but Thomas didn't respond. He was staring at the woman at the piano like he was seeing her for the first time. His face had gone from confident to shocked, to something that was starting to look like embarrassment. The music softened again, moving into the gentle, haunting final section of the nocturne. This was the part that could break your heart if it was played right. The melody became simpler, more intimate, like a whispered confession in the dark. A woman in the growing crowd outside the lounge wiped at her eyes. An elderly man stood with his hands clasped together, his head bowed as if in prayer. Even the bartender had stopped pretending to work and was just listening. She reached the final measures of the piece, her hands slowing, the notes becoming softer and softer until they were barely whispers. The last chord hung in the air, sustained by the damper pedal, slowly fading into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The lounge was so quiet you could hear the ice settling in someone's glass at the bar. Then the applause started. It began with the elderly man, clapping slowly and deliberately. Others joined in quickly. Soon the entire lounge was applauding, and the people in the lobby outside were clapping too. Someone whistled. Someone else called out, "Bravo." She opened her eyes, seeming to come back from wherever the music had taken her. She looked around at the crowd, at all these people watching her, and the color drained from her face. Her hands were shaking as she pulled them away from the keys and folded them in her lap. Thomas just stood there, frozen, while everyone around him clapped and cheered. His friends at the bar were clapping too, but they kept looking at him, waiting to see what he would do. Finally, the applause began to die down. People started returning to their conversations, though many kept glancing back at the piano. The spell was breaking and reality was creeping back in. She stood up from the bench quickly, too quickly. She looked like she wanted to run. "Wait," Thomas said, finding his voice at last. He walked toward her, and she could see his face clearly now. The arrogance was gone completely. He looked like someone who had just been slapped and was still trying to figure out what had happened. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. His voice was different now, quieter, almost respectful. She didn't answer. She was looking at the floor, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. "No, seriously," Thomas continued. That wasn't just good. That was professional level. That was concert pianist level." Patricia stepped forward from where she had been watching. "Thomas, maybe you should just—" "I want to know," Thomas interrupted, but there was no aggression in his tone now. "Please, where did you learn to play like that?" The woman at the piano took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet that Thomas had to lean in to hear her. "I went to Juilliard." The words landed like a bomb in the quiet lounge. "You went to Juilliard," Thomas repeated slowly, like he was trying to make sense of a sentence in a foreign language. "The Juilliard School, in New York." She nodded. "The most prestigious music school in the country," Thomas continued, still processing. "Maybe the world." "I had a full scholarship," she said, still not looking at him. "I was there for 2 years." One of Thomas's friends let out a low whistle. Another muttered something under his breath. Everyone who had stayed to watch knew what Juilliard meant. You didn't just go to Juilliard. You had to be exceptional. You had to be one of the best young musicians in the entire country just to be considered. 2 years, Thomas said. "Why just 2 years?" "What happened?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It does matter," Patricia said, stepping closer. She had tears in her eyes. "It matters. You should tell him. Tell everyone. Patricia, please. Tell them why you're working night shifts at a hotel instead of playing concerts around the world." Patricia continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Tell them why you left." The woman looked up finally, meeting Thomas's eyes for the first time since she had finished playing. In that moment, he saw something in her face that made his embarrassment deepen into shame. There was pain there. Old pain, the kind that had settled into a person's bones and made a permanent home. "My mother got sick," she said simply. "I was 19. Someone had to take care of her." The words hung in the air between them. Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it again. What could he say? What could anyone say? "I was being trained for a concert career," she continued, her voice steady now. "I had performed at Carnegie Hall. I had offers for international tours. But none of that mattered when she got diagnosed. She needed me, so I came home. 7 years ago," Patricia added quietly. "She's been taking care of her mother for 7 years, working nights so she can be home during the day." Thomas looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. The silence in the lounge felt heavy. Thomas stood there, his expensive suit suddenly looking ridiculous, his whole confident persona crumbling around him. He had spent the last hour making judgments about people, deciding who was good enough and who wasn't. And now he had just humiliated someone who had given up everything to care for her family. "I'm sorry," he said finally, and the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I didn't know." She shrugged slightly like she had heard apologies before and they didn't change anything. "How could you?" "I don't talk about it." "That's not an excuse," Patricia said sharply, looking at Thomas. "You made assumptions. You always make assumptions about people." Thomas couldn't argue with that. He had made assumptions. He had looked at this woman in her simple work clothes and sensible shoes and decided he knew everything about her. He had seen someone he thought would be easy to mock, easy to put in her place. He had been looking for entertainment at someone else's expense. "What's your mother's condition?" asked an older woman who had been sitting at one of the tables. She had moved closer during the conversation, drawn in like everyone else. "If you don't mind me asking." The pianist hesitated, then answered, "Early onset Alzheimer's. She was only 48 when she was diagnosed. I'm an only child. My father passed away when I was young. There was no one else." The older woman nodded slowly, understanding crossing her face. "So you gave up Juilliard to become her caregiver?" "It wasn't really a choice," she replied. "Not for me, anyway. She had given up everything to make sure I could study music. She worked 2 jobs to pay for my lessons before I got the scholarship. She drove me to competitions and recitals. She believed in me when no one else did. When she got sick, I knew what I had to do. But your career," Thomas said, still trying to process all of this. "You were at Carnegie Hall. You had your whole future ahead of you." "My mother is my future," she said firmly. "Music will always be there. Family won't." Patricia wiped at her eyes. "I've worked with you for 3 years." 3 years? You never said anything. What would I say?" the woman asked. "Hi, I used to be somebody, but now I check people into hotel rooms. It's not exactly a conversation starter." "You are somebody," Patricia insisted. "You're still that person." "Am I?" She looked down at her hands, at the fingers that had just created such beautiful music. "I haven't performed publicly in 7 years. I haven't auditioned for anything. I practice at home when my mother is sleeping, but that's not the same as really playing. That's not the same as being a musician. What you just played says different." The older woman from the table spoke up again. "That wasn't someone who used to be a musician. That was a musician. A real one." Others in the small crowd murmured their agreement. The businessman who had wandered in from the lobby nodded enthusiastically. "I've been to concerts at the Philharmonic," he said. "Professional concerts with famous pianists. What you just played was every bit as good as anything I've heard there." She smiled sadly. "That's kind of you to say." "It's not kindness, it's truth," the man insisted. "You have a gift." "A real gift," Thomas cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him, and he shifted uncomfortably under their collective gaze. "The weekend pianist position," he began. "It pays $200 per night, Friday and Saturday. I'd like to offer it to you." "If you want it," Thomas, one of his friends at the bar, called out. "Didn't you say it paid $400 per night when we were talking earlier?" Thomas's face went red. His friend was right. He had been planning to pay whoever he hired $400 per night, but he was so flustered that he had accidentally said $200. Or maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe some part of him was still trying to maintain control of the situation. $400, the friend repeated, louder this time. "Per night." "That's what you told us, right?" Thomas said quickly. "Yes, $400 per night." "That's what I meant." The woman looked at him for a long moment. "I can't do late nights," she said. "I need to be home by midnight at the latest. My mother has episodes sometimes. She gets confused and scared if I'm not there." "We can work around that," Thomas said quickly. "You could play from 8 to 11:30. That would work." She seemed to be considering it. Patricia could see the wheels turning in her head, calculating whether she could handle both jobs, whether the extra money would be worth the exhaustion. "Before you answer," the older woman spoke up again, "I need to tell you something." Everyone turned to look at her. She was well-dressed, probably in her 60s, with kind eyes and an air of authority about her. "My name is Catherine Brennan," she said. "I'm a documentary producer. I'm in town working on a project about hidden talent in America. Stories about people with extraordinary abilities who have been overlooked or forgotten." The woman at the piano looked confused. "I don't understand." "I want to tell your story," Catherine said simply. "With your permission, of course. I want to film you, interview you, and feature you in the documentary. More than that, I want to help arrange a proper concert for you. One night. A real performance at a real venue." "I can't," the woman said immediately. "I have responsibilities." "My mother would be there," Catherine interrupted gently. "Front row if she's able. We would arrange everything. Transportation, a professional caregiver for the evening, whatever you need. The concert would benefit Alzheimer's research. All the proceeds would go to finding a cure for the disease that took your mother from you." The woman's eyes widened. "All the proceeds?" "Every penny," Catherine confirmed. and the documentary would help raise awareness. Your story could inspire others. It could help families who are going through what you're going through. Patricia was crying openly now. You have to do it, she said to her coworker. Please, you have to. I don't know, the woman said, shaking her head. It's been so long. I don't even know if I'm still good enough for a real concert. Are you joking? Thomas said, and he actually laughed. Not a mean laugh this time, but one of genuine disbelief. Did you not hear yourself just now? You're better than good enough. You're incredible. He's right, the businessman agreed. For once in his life, Thomas is absolutely right. That got a small laugh from the crowd, even from Thomas himself. Catherine pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to the woman. Think about it. Take your time. But please think about it. The world deserves to hear you play. Your mother deserves to see her daughter shine one more time. The woman took the card with trembling hands. She looked at it, then at Catherine, then at all the faces watching her with hope and encouragement. I need to get home, she said quietly. My mother will be waking up soon. Of course, Catherine said. But call me, please. The woman nodded and started to walk toward the exit. Patricia caught up with her, linking her arm through hers. You're going to do it, right? Patricia whispered as they walked. The concert? I don't know, came the honest answer. I really don't know. But as they pushed through the doors into the cool night air, something had shifted. For the first time in 7 years, possibility hung in the air around her. The door she had closed so firmly when she left Juilliard had opened just a crack, letting in a sliver of light. Behind them, in the lounge, Thomas stood alone, still processing everything that had happened. He had come to work expecting an ordinary night of mediocre auditions and easy judgments. Instead, he had learned something about assumptions, about dignity, and about the depth that exists in people when you bother to look beneath the surface. He picked up his phone and started typing a text to his boss. They needed to talk about a lot of things, starting with how they treated their staff. 3 days passed before she called Catherine. 3 days of going through her normal routine, checking guests into the hotel, helping with their problems, pretending everything was the same as it had always been. But it wasn't the same. Something had changed that night in the lounge, and she couldn't put it back the way it was. Her mother had good days and bad days. On the good days, she recognized her daughter, and they could have almost normal conversations. On the bad days, she thought her daughter was a stranger, or worse, someone from her distant past who had been gone for decades. The morning after the incident at the hotel had been a good day. Her mother had been sitting at the kitchen table when she got home, doing a crossword puzzle like she used to before the disease took hold. You're home late, her mother had said, looking up with clear eyes. Did something happen at work? She had sat down across from her mother, still processing everything. Something did happen, something unexpected, and she had told her mother the whole story, about Thomas and the bet, about playing the Chopin Nocturne, about Catherine and the documentary and the concert idea. Her mother had listened quietly, her crossword puzzle forgotten. You should do it, her mother had said when she finished. The concert. Mom, I can't just leave you for... I'm not a child, her mother had interrupted, and there was a flash of the strong woman she used to be. I'm sick, yes, but I'm not helpless, not yet. And if there's a chance for you to play again, really play, you should take it. But what if you need me? Her mother had reached across the table and taken her hand. Baby, I've needed you for 7 years. You've been here every single day. You gave up your dreams for me. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think it breaks my heart every time I remember what you sacrificed? You didn't ask me to. No, I didn't. But you did it anyway because that's who you are. And I love you for it. But now someone is offering you a chance to have both. A chance to play music and help other families like ours at the same time. How can you say no to that? That conversation had stayed with her for 3 days. Finally, on her next night off, she had pulled out Catherine's business card and made the call. Now, 2 months later, she stood backstage at the Riverside Theater, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The theater wasn't huge, maybe 500 seats, but it was beautiful. Red velvet chairs, ornate gold trim on the walls, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. It was the kind of place she used to dream about performing in when she was a student. Catherine had been true to her word about everything. She had arranged for a professional caregiver named Helen to stay with her mother, not just for the evening, but for the whole week leading up to the concert, giving her time to practice properly. She had secured the theater, handled all the publicity, and even arranged for a professional piano tuner to come and prepare the instrument. The documentary crew had been filming for weeks now. They had interviewed her at home, at the hotel, even at her mother's doctor's office with permission. They had filmed her practicing, her hands finding their way back to the difficult pieces she used to know by heart. It had been harder than she expected. 7 years of limited practice had dulled some of her technical edge. Her fingers cramped more easily now. Her endurance wasn't what it used to be, but Catherine kept telling her it didn't matter. "The audience isn't coming to see perfection," she had said. "They're coming to see heart. They're coming to see courage, and you have both in abundance." Still standing backstage now, hearing the murmur of the crowd filing into their seats, she felt like she might be sick. "How are you holding up?" Patricia appeared beside her, dressed in her nicest outfit. She had taken the night off from the hotel to be here. So had several other staff members. Even the night manager had come. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "What if I freeze up? What if I forget the pieces?" "Then you'll remember them again," Patricia said simply. "And everyone out there will love you anyway." "Do you know how fast the tickets sold out?" 2 hours. 2 hours after Catherine announced the concert, every seat was gone. "That just makes it worse," Patricia laughed. "Listen to me. Those people aren't here hoping you'll fail. They're here hoping you'll succeed. They want to see something beautiful happen. They want to believe that dreams can come back to life. You're giving them that gift." A stagehand appeared. 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Is my mother here?" she asked Patricia. "Front row, center seat. Helen is with her. Your mom looks so proud. She's been telling everyone around her that you're her daughter." That made her smile despite her nerves. It was a good day for her mother then. That was something. Thomas appeared backstage looking nervous himself. Over the past 2 months he had changed. The arrogance had been replaced with something more genuine. He had become one of her biggest supporters, spreading word about the concert to everyone he knew, even personally calling music critics to encourage them to attend. "I just wanted to say," he began, then stopped. "I wanted to say that what you're doing tonight matters. What happened at the hotel that night, it changed me. It made me look at how I treat people, how I make judgments. I've been thinking about it every day since." "Thomas, you don't have to." "I do," he insisted. "I do have to say it. I was cruel to you. I tried to humiliate you for my own amusement. And you responded with grace and dignity and the most beautiful music I've ever heard. You taught me something important that night. You taught everyone there's something important." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. 2 minutes, the stagehand called. Catherine appeared with her camera crew. "We'll be filming from the balcony," she explained. "You won't even know we're there. Just play like you did that night at the hotel. Play from your heart." Patricia hugged her quickly. "I'll be in the 3rd row cheering the loudest." Then they were all gone, heading out to take their seats, and she was alone backstage. She could hear the crowd settling in, the rustling of programs, the excited whispers. The house lights must have dimmed because the noise level dropped suddenly. She heard someone walk onto the stage. It was the theater director, welcoming everyone and explaining the purpose of the concert. She heard him mention Alzheimer's research, heard the applause when he said all proceeds would go to finding a cure. Then he said her name, and the applause grew louder. This was it. This was the moment. She closed her eyes and thought about her mother sitting out there in the front row. She thought about all the years of sacrifice, all the small moments of beauty found in the midst of difficulty. She thought about the piano in their small apartment, the one she played in the quiet hours of the night when her mother was sleeping peacefully. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who had played at Carnegie Hall with stars in her eyes and the whole world ahead of her. And she thought about the woman she had become, the one who had chosen love over ambition, family over fame. Both of those people were real. Both of them mattered. She opened her eyes and walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit her and the crowd came into view. Hundreds of faces all turned toward her, all waiting. She found her mother in the front row. Even from the stage, she could see the tears already streaming down her mother's face. She walked to the piano, sat down at the bench and placed her hands on the keys. Then she began to play. The first piece she played was the same Chopin nocturne from that night at the hotel. It felt right to start there, to bring the story full circle, but this time was different. This time she wasn't playing to prove anything to anyone. She was playing because she wanted to, because she needed to, because the music inside her had been waiting 7 years to be set free. The notes flowed out into the theater, filling every corner with sound. She could feel the audience holding their breath, leaning forward in their seats. When she reached the final chord and let it fade into silence, the applause was immediate and thunderous. She played for 90 minutes that night. Chopin, Debussy, Rachmaninoff, and pieces she had written herself during those quiet nights at home. Between songs, she spoke to the audience, telling them her story in her own words. She talked about her mother, about the diagnosis that changed everything, about the choice that hadn't really felt like a choice at all. "People have asked me if I regret giving up my career," she said at one point, her voice carrying through the theater. "The truth is, I gave up one dream to live another. I traded concert halls for quiet moments at my mother's bedside. I traded international tours for grocery store trips and doctor's appointments, and I would make the same choice again every single time." Her mother was crying in the front row, but she was smiling too. Helen, the caregiver, had her arm around her shoulders. "But here's what I learned," she continued. "Dreams don't really die. They transform. They adapt. Music didn't leave me just because I left the stage. It was there every morning when I made breakfast. It was there every night when I sat at our old piano and played while my mother slept. It was there in the small moments, the quiet moments, the moments that nobody else saw." She played an original composition then, something she had written just for this night. She called it "For the Caregivers," and dedicated it to everyone who had put their own dreams on hold to care for someone they loved. The melody was both sad and hopeful, acknowledging the sacrifice while celebrating the love behind it. When the concert ended and she played her final note, the entire theater rose to their feet. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 10 minutes. People were cheering, crying, calling for an encore. She played one more piece, something short and sweet, and then it was finally over. Backstage afterward, she was surrounded by people, strangers who wanted to shake her hand, to tell her their own stories about caring for sick family members, to thank her for giving them hope. A music teacher from a local high school asked if she would consider giving lessons. A man from the Alzheimer's Association told her the concert had raised over $40,000 for research. Catherine was beaming, her camera crew capturing everything. "The documentary is going to be powerful," she said. "Your story is going to reach millions of people." But the moment she remembered most clearly came later, after most of the crowd had left. She was sitting in the empty theater with her mother, just the two of them in the quiet space. Helen had stepped away to give them privacy. "Did you enjoy it, Mom?" she asked. Her mother looked at her, and her eyes were clear and focused. "I always knew you were special," she said. "From the first time you touched a piano when you were 4 years old. You played with your whole heart even then. I learned that from you," she replied. "You taught me that anything worth doing is worth putting your whole heart into." Her mother reached over and took her hand. "I need to tell you something while I still can, while I still remember how to say it." "Mom, don't listen," her mother said firmly. "The disease is taking me away piece by piece. We both know that. Soon I won't remember your name. I might not even remember that I have a daughter. But tonight, right now, I remember everything. And I need you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because you played at Carnegie Hall when you were 16. Not because you got into Juilliard. I'm proud of you because you're kind. Because you're loyal. Because when life asked you to choose between fame and love, you chose love without hesitation. The tears were falling freely now, for both of them. And I need you to promise me something," her mother continued. "Promise me you won't stop playing. Not anymore. Find a way to keep music in your life. You're too talented to hide in the shadows." "I promise," she whispered. They sat there together for a long time, mother and daughter, in the empty theater where dreams had just come back to life. The months that followed brought changes she never expected. The documentary aired on a major streaming platform and became one of their most watched programs. Her story touched something deep in people. The comments and messages flooded in by the thousands, other caregivers reaching out saying they felt seen and understood, musicians who had given up their art, finding inspiration to try again. A music school in the city offered her a teaching position with flexible hours that would work around her mother's care schedule. She accepted, finding joy in passing on her knowledge to young students who reminded her of herself at that age. Thomas had become a genuine friend. He had used his connections in the hotel industry to help arrange benefit concerts at other venues, all supporting Alzheimer's research. He often joked that she had humbled him in the best possible way. Patricia still worked night shifts with her at the hotel. She had been offered the weekend pianist position but kept it part-time, not wanting to give up her day job completely. The hotel had become supportive too, adjusting her schedule when she needed time for teaching or the occasional special performance. The money from the concert and the documentary had helped tremendously. She was able to hire Helen for regular shifts, giving herself breaks when she needed them. She had set up a small scholarship fund for music students whose families were dealing with serious illness. Her mother's condition continued to decline, as they both knew it would. The good days became fewer, but on those rare mornings when her mother's eyes cleared and recognition sparked, when she smiled and said her daughter's name, those moments felt like miracles. One evening, about a year after the concert, she sat at the piano in their small apartment. Her mother was asleep in the next room, resting peacefully. She began to play, not for an audience this time, but just for herself, just because the music needed to come out. As her fingers moved across the keys, she thought about that night at the hotel, about Thomas and his bet, about how a single moment of courage had changed everything. She thought about the path not taken, the concert career that might have been, and she realized she didn't regret any of it. This life, the one she was living right now, was enough. More than enough. It was beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with fame or recognition. It was real and honest and full of love. She finished the piece and sat quietly, her hands resting on the keys. Through the thin wall, she could hear her mother's gentle breathing. The sound of someone she loved, still here, still with her. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new struggles, new small victories. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. She had bet on love instead of fame. She had chosen the quiet moments over the spotlight. And looking back now, she knew with absolute certainty that she had won the only bet that truly mattered. The music would always be there, waiting in her fingers, living in her heart. And that, she realized, was more than enough. That was everything.